when Rose's mother slapped a check for $5 million down in front of me and told me to leave her daughter. I didn't hesitate for a second. I had spent 5 years by Rose's side, given her the best years of my life. $5 million wasn't nearly enough for that. Word of what happened got back to Rose quickly. I heard later that the day she came looking for me, she had skipped her most important meeting of the year. When Rose burst into the condo she had bought for me, I was in the middle of packing my things. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her face a dark storm cloud. After all our years together, I knew that look on her face meant she was furious. "Ms. Miller, $5 million to break up with you. Is that really so hard to understand?" I said with a smile, trying my best not to look as pathetic as I felt. As I expected, my words only enraged her further. She practically spat the words through clenched teeth. "You walk out that door, and you'd better not live to regret it." With that, she slammed the door and was gone. The truth is, Rose had been good to me over the years, at least in a material sense. For years, she had kept me like a pretty boy living off her dime. Luxury cars, designer goods, expensive watches, she never skimped on any of it. If I had stayed with her, I would have gotten far more than this $5 million. But I was just fed up with it all. If I hadn't recently heard that Ethan was coming back from overseas, I might have forgotten who I really was in her life. I was just a stand-in. Ethan Sterling was Rose's fiancé, the man from a family of similar standing that her mother had always wanted for her. I managed to pack up all my belongings in less than half an hour. After leaving the condo, I had nowhere to go, so I ended up at my friend Leo's place. Unfortunately, his new girlfriend was there too. Watching the two of them be all lovey-dovey just made me feel like a third wheel. Leo gave me an apologetic look, and since I hadn't called ahead, I took the hint and checked into a hotel. It was a place Rose and I used to frequent. Sometimes after drinking too much at a work function, we'd get a room there for the night. Rose could hold her liquor incredibly well and rarely lost her composure in public. But when she did get truly drunk, no one could handle her except for me. Her secretary knew to call me every single time. While I was checking in, the woman at the front desk recognized me. She smiled and asked, "Is Ms. Miller not with you tonight?" I just shook my head and said plainly, "Ms. Miller and I are no longer together." She seemed taken aback by how casually I said it and looked a little embarrassed. After all, everyone in their social circle knew about our arrangement. Rose Miller was the famously single CEO, and I was just the trophy boyfriend she paid to keep her happy. Once I was settled in the room, I poured myself a drink and blasted my favorite heavy metal music to unwind. Rose hated rock music, always said it was just noise. Whenever I was with her, I had to listen to the calming, classical stuff she preferred. But now, drinking expensive liquor and listening to the loud music, I felt like something was missing. I holed up in that hotel room for 3 straight days until Leo finally came looking for me. Leo knew about the breakup and had even taken time off with his girlfriend, planning a trip for us to get my mind off things. But the day before we were supposed to leave, something urgent came up at his company. Our guy's trip to clear my head quickly turned into a solo vacation. In the end, I went to Miami, Florida by myself. Just as I boarded the plane, my phone started ringing. It was Rose. It rang and rang until a flight attendant came by to remind me that we were about to take off and I needed to turn off my phone. Right before I powered it down, a text from her came through. "I'm only going to say this once. When you're done with your tantrum, come home." Staring at that single line of text, my mind flashed back to something that happened 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago, about a year into our relationship, when I first found out about Ethan. That night, I got wasted and threw a fit at her for the very first time. She was in her study working, sitting behind her massive desk, deep in a conference call with people overseas, looking as cool and captivating as ever. I stumbled in, completely drunk from a night at the bar. Rose had a strict rule about not being disturbed when she was working. But that night, fueled by alcohol, I wrapped my arms around her slim waist. I leaned in and kissed the sensitive spot on her collarbone, asking her petulantly if her work was more important than me. That night, she was genuinely angry. She looked up at me, her eyes like ice. "I'll say this one more time. I am working. Get out." I tried to press on, but she called her bodyguards and had me thrown out of the room. The moment I was outside the mansion, I started to regret it. The neighborhood was in the middle of nowhere, especially late at night. To make matters worse, my phone was dead, so I was completely stranded. I was on my 15th cigarette by the side of the road when Rose finally came out. She didn't look pleased, walking towards me in a silk nightgown with thin straps. "Are you done making a scene?" she asked. I I took a drag from the cigarette, the brand she hated most, ready with a defiant comeback. But I let out a loud sneeze instead. I must have looked ridiculous, because Rose couldn't help but laugh. For the first time, she held out her hand to me, but I was too proud and stubborn, so I pushed it away. Her hand hung there in the air, and I could see the anger return to her face. She tilted her head and looked at me. I'll say it one last time. When you're done, come back. She meant what she said. After those words, she turned to leave. I called after her, give me my car keys. Make, she said without turning back. I bought you that car. If you're not coming back, you're not taking it with you. In that moment, the nature of our relationship became crystal clear. The watch on my wrist, the car I drove, the designer clothes on my back. Rose had bought them all. When I didn't respond, she turned back around and stood there, her hand still outstretched towards me. From that day forward, I became the obedient man she wanted me to be, and I stayed that way for 5 years. I put my phone away, deleting her text as I did. After a 2-hour flight, I landed at Miami International Airport. My luck ran out almost immediately. Not long after getting off the plane, I realized my wallet was gone. At the police station, the officers eyed my expensive designer clothes from head to toe. Their expressions seemed to say, who else would they rob? I couldn't speak the language, had no money, and no ID to prove who I was. An officer pushed a phone across the desk toward me, gesturing for me to call someone. My parents died in an accident when I was a kid, and my grandmother raised me. She passed away before I could ever give her a comfortable life. The year she died was the year I met Rose. She was like a ray of light in my otherwise bleak existence. With no other choice, I tried calling her. I dialed her number again and again, the steady, unanswered ringing a stark reminder that the light she once brought into my life was now completely gone. I couldn't remember Leo's number, and the officer across from me was clearly losing his patience. It wasn't until late afternoon that a young American woman came to my rescue. Her name was Chloe. She happened to be at the station on some business of her own and saw me looking lost in the corner. Taking pity on me, she used her fluent Spanish to help me communicate with the officers. After leaving the station, I got a new phone number and cut off all ties with Rose. But every now and then, I'd still see news about her online. There were pictures of Ethan shopping with her, his face full of adoration. The two of them, looking like the perfect couple, at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new hotel. Announcements that their wedding of the century was imminent. I stayed in Miami and became good friend with Chloe. With her help, I managed to get a job at an international trade company. After 5 years of being kept by Rose, it felt like I had completely forgotten how to support myself. The language barrier was tough and the work was demanding, but thankfully, I had Chloe to help me through it. We were two souls adrift in a new city, finding comfort in each other's company. But as we learned, sometimes two lonely people huddling together don't create warmth. They just share the cold. Standing on a balcony with a sweeping view of the city, I asked Chloe with a smile, "Why did you decide to stay here?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. It was the night of the city's annual lantern release festival. Sky lanterns drifted across the night, the warm yellow candlelight illuminating the sharp angles of her face. She told me her story then. Coming to Miami for the festival had been a dream of her late boyfriend's. "They say if you make a wish on a lantern," she said softly, "it'll come true." I knew she was thinking of him as she spoke. He never made it here. He had died in her arms. I've never been one for prayers or superstitions, but in that moment, I clasped my hands together and made a silent, fervent wish to the sea of lanterns floating above. I want to forget Rose. The days passed, and work kept me busy. Sometimes, I had to deal with my supervisor's unwanted advances. The guy was gay and would use work as an excuse to touch me or make inappropriate jokes. To help me out, Chloe came to pick me up from work one day and pretended to be my girlfriend. After that, the supervisor left me alone, and I was grateful for the peace. After nearly 2 years in Miami, I was suddenly assigned to a project that required me to return to my home city. Within a couple of days, I had packed my bags and was on a flight back with a few of my colleagues. As soon as we landed, representatives from the client company were there to meet us and take us to our hotel. It was the same hotel Rose and I used to frequent. I froze at the entrance for a moment, lost, as a flood of memories I thought I'd buried came rushing back. My grip on my suitcase only loosened when I saw that the woman at the front desk was someone new. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Miller, good to see you." Halfway through our check-in, I heard a flurry of footsteps approaching from behind. My body, which had just begun to relax, tensed up all over again as a familiar scent hit me. It was the perfume I had given her. Rose never really wore perfume, but I had gone through a phase of being obsessed with fragrances and had blended this one for her myself. It smelled like the first flower to bloom in the morning. But in all the time I was with her, she had never once worn it. The group behind us paused for a second, and then the scent was gone as they moved on. I looked up just in time to see Rose and Ethan, surrounded by an entourage, disappear around a corner. I knew there was a chance I'd run into her, but I never imagined it would be this soon. The project we were here for was a joint venture between the Miller and Sterling families. Still, I held out hope I could avoid her. Our part of the project wasn't significant enough to require the personal attention of the CEOs. A couple of project managers should have been sufficient. But then, at lunchtime, the client company suddenly arranged a formal dinner. My colleagues from Miami called me over to the private dining room. The moment I pushed the door open, I saw her. Rose was seated at the head of the table. The light from the crystal chandelier cascaded down on her, and in the 2 years since I'd last seen her, she had only grown more radiant. After we were seated, my boss, eager to close the deal, kept pushing me to offer a toast to Rose. During my 5 years with her, I'd been to countless parties and had taken countless drinks on her behalf. That was until the time I ended up in the hospital with a bleeding ulcer from drinking so much for her, and the doctor strictly forbade me from ever drinking again. I hadn't touched alcohol in a long time. Well, except for my years in Miami. On sleepless nights, a drink was the only thing that helped me pass out. My glass was quickly filled with wine, and my boss urged me in a low voice, "Make, Mr. Sterling himself is here. That's how much he values this partnership. You have to make this toast." Over the rim of my glass, I felt Rose's cool gaze fall upon me. I stood up and raised my glass. Just as I was about to speak, Rose's voice cut through the room. "He can't drink." A silence fell over the table as everyone exchanged confused glances. My colleagues shot curious, gossipy looks in my direction. Just then, the door to the room opened. Ethan Sterling walked in, tall and imposing in a bespoke suit with chiseled features. The moment he entered, my colleagues stared, stunned. I was right there with them. They clearly had no idea, and were shocked by how much Ethan and I resembled each other. Ethan, however, was perfectly composed. He smiled politely at the table. "My apologies for being late," he said, his eyes then landing on me with a deep, searching look. I had long since cut the hairstyle Rose used to love on me, my mid-length hair now tied back in a messy bun. Dressed in a casual denim jacket, I looked nothing like the polished man she preferred, nothing like Ethan. Ethan studied my face for a moment, as if we were old acquaintances. "You must be Make," he said. "You really do look a lot like me." My hand holding the wine glass trembled, but I forced myself to remain calm. Finally, I smiled back at him. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "perhaps it's you who looks like me." He had the same haircut I used to have, and he was wearing a suit from the same designer I used to favor. He looked exactly like a carbon copy of my former self. After I spoke, my eyes shifted to Rose, who sat with her lips pressed into a thin, silent line. I raised my glass with a broad smile. "Ms. Miller, Mr. Sterling, this is to you." Then, as I saw Rose's brow furrow in concern, I downed the entire glass of red wine. After dinner, I stood by the curb waiting for Chloe to pick me up. She had returned home a couple of months before me to take care of her sick mother. I waited for a while, but instead of Chloe's car, a Porsche with a familiar license plate pulled up in front of me. The window rolled down, revealing Rose's face, half in shadow, half in light. She spoke to me in the same commanding tone she always used. "Get in." But she seemed to have forgotten that I was no longer her obedient little pet. "No thanks, Ms. Miller," I said. "I'm waiting for someone." Just as the words left my mouth, Chloe's Volkswagen pulled up. I felt Rose's piercing gaze on me as I got into the passenger seat. As we drove off, Chloe glanced in the rearview mirror at the Porsche that was following us steadily. "Well, thanks to you," she joked. "This is the first time I've ever been tailed by a luxury car. Time to show me what you can do." We shared a look, and she floored it. In the middle of rush hour traffic, the expensive Porsche was no match for her skill driving, and we quickly lost Rose. On the drive, Chloe said, "I heard what happened at dinner." She was obviously talking about the scene with Ethan. It wasn't surprising she knew. One of my colleagues on the trip was a mutual friend, and I could already imagine the stories they were telling. I just smiled and didn't say anything. After a long silence, Chloe pulled the car over. She looked at me earnestly and said, "If you need anything, Just ask. After that dinner, I didn't see Rose again for a while. I overheard my colleagues gossiping that she was busy with her new hotel project. The hotel was being built specifically for her and Ethan's wedding. As they said this, one of them shot me a knowing glance. I didn't respond, just kept my head down and ate my food. I had noticed that the hotel had been serving all my favorite dishes lately. I didn't have to wonder why. I knew it was Rose's doing. A week later, Rose came looking for me. I had just gotten back from hanging out with Leo and some old friends. I just showered and was about to get into bed when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rose standing there. She smelled of alcohol, her eye makeup was smudged, and she was unsteady on her high heels. Her secretary, Ms. Davis, who I knew well, was with her. I must have looked annoyed, because Ms. Davis spoke up awkwardly. "Mr. Grant, Ms. Miller has had too much to drink, and she insisted on seeing you." I knew that when Rose was drunk, she was impossible to manage. I understood what she was asking. I used to be the one to handle it. But we weren't together anymore. "Ms. Davis," I said coldly, "Ms. Miller and I are no longer involved." With that, I started to close the door. Before the door could shut, Rose grabbed my wrist. Her eyes were filled with a vulnerability I had never seen in her before. The imperious, commanding Rose Miller I knew was gone, replaced by someone who looked like a lost, abandoned puppy. With red-rimmed eyes, she looked at me and pleaded, "Make, please come back." Seeing her like this, my resolve softened. She clung to my hand with a desperate strength, all her usual pride gone. But she seemed to forget the difference in our strength. Even with all her effort, I easily pried her fingers off my arm. Still, she refused to leave. I looked helplessly at Ms. Davis. Ms. Davis was reluctant to call Ethan, so not wanting to put her in a difficult position, I reached into Rose's pocket for her phone. As I pulled it out, my finger accidentally brushed against the sensor, and the screen unlocked. I had added my fingerprint years ago when she was in a good mood. Back then, our relationship was strong, and I was trying to do all the normal things couples do. I never thought she would have kept it all this time. I opened her contacts, and my old number was still pinned to the top. I scrolled down and found Ethan's name. When he answered, his voice was cheerful, but it dropped the instant he recognized my voice on the line. After I hung up, I felt a pang of something familiar. I used to feel that same rush of happiness whenever she called me. Ethan arrived quickly. You could see the genuine worry on his face. He was dressed in sweatpants and house slippers, clearly having rushed over. His eyes were filled with concern as he looked at the drunken Rose. After Ethan led Rose away, Ms. Davis stayed behind and told me a few things. She told me that after I left, Rose had searched for me for a very long time. She said that Rose's mother had been pressuring her constantly to marry Ethan, but Rose had always refused. She also mentioned that the condo Rose bought for me had been kept exactly as I'd left it, and that on several occasions she had found Rose there, passed out drunk with a bottle in her arms. The next day, after our project meeting, Rose cornered me in the underground parking garage. She blocked my path. "Make, do you really hate me that much?" she asked. I looked at her and said flatly, "Ms. Miller, please get out of my way." I tried to walk past her, but she grabbed the hem of my jacket. Her grip was so tight her knuckles turned white. "Make," she said, her voice strained, "I looked for you for so long. This time, I'm not letting you go." Rose was true to her word. I don't know what she said to my boss, but I was forced to move back into the condo she had bought for me. She promised that if I still felt the same way when the project was over, she would let me go for good. Maybe it was for revenge, or maybe it was out of pity, but looking at her stubborn face, I agreed. The high and mighty Rose I once knew had changed completely. The moment she was free from work, she would call me. If I didn't pick up, she would flood my phone with texts. Whenever something interesting happened, she would message me to share it, acting like a giddy teenager in love. I never replied. The second she finished work, she would rush to the condo and cook my favorite meals for me. This was a woman who had never set foot in a kitchen. Now she had little burn marks on her perfectly manicured hands and didn't seem to care. She would just sit across from me, her eyes shining, waiting for me to take a bite. If I told her it was good, she would light up like a child on Christmas morning. And just like before, she started having stacks of the newest luxury watches and gifts delivered to the condo. Ethan came to see me once. We met at a coffee shop, sitting face to face. The server who brought our coffees did a double take, staring at our similar faces before walking away. He told me to let Rose go, to stop bothering her. I looked at him, a man whose every mannerism seemed to be a faint echo of my own, and I laughed. You know perfectly well that I'm not the one doing the chasing here, I said. She's the one chasing me. His face went pale. The truth was, from the moment I saw him at that dinner, I knew. It wasn't that I was a substitute for him. He had been molded to be a substitute for me. After a long pause, Ethan finally asked, "How much money do you want to go away?" How much money? Looking at him, I was reminded of Rose's mother offering me $5 million to disappear from her daughter's life. He and her mother were so much alike. I took a sip of my coffee and slowly held up one finger. The tension in Ethan's face immediately eased. "$1 million is nothing," he said with a sneer. "No," I corrected him. $10 million. His eyes widened in disbelief. "What on earth makes you think you're worth $10 million?" he scoffed. I smiled. When Rose got rid of our child, her mother gave me $5 million to keep my mouth shut. So now, asking for $10 million doesn't seem unreasonable at all, does it? It was clear Ethan had no idea about this. The color drained from his face, his features twisting in shock. For years, I'd woken up from the same nightmare, a tiny, baby-sized hand reaching for me. A blood-covered infant, crying endlessly in my dreams. Our child, the child Rose had gotten rid of without telling me. Rose's mother had always turned a blind eye to our relationship, but she would never allow a child of the Miller family to have my blood. I remember that day. I knelt at her feet for the first time in my life, begging her, pleading with her to show mercy. I told her I would take the baby and disappear forever. I just begged her not to make Rose go through with it. Of course, she refused. With a wave of her hand, several men in black suits surrounded me. They dragged me away and locked me in a room. They gave me a shot of something, and I felt nothing. When I woke up, they told me it was over. They told me Rose had gotten the abortion. Rose didn't come back to the condo for a month. And then, her mother offered me the $5 million to leave Rose for good, because Ethan was returning to take over the Sterling family business. My time by Rose's side was over. I accepted her offer so quickly that it even seemed to surprise her. She sneered at me. "I knew it. You were only with my daughter for her money." But what choice did I have? I had no power, no connections, no family. They had already taken the one thing I cared about most in the world. If it hadn't been for work, I would have never set foot in this city again. When I got back to the condo from the coffee shop, Rose had a full dinner spread waiting on the table. It took me a moment to realize what day it was. It was my birthday. I could tell she had put a lot of effort into the meal. There were 8 dishes and a soup, all of my favorites, and I could see fresh burns on the backs of her delicate hands. Suddenly, the lights went out, and she appeared with a beautiful cake, singing "Happy Birthday to You." Rose had never once celebrated my birthday before, and seeing her now, I felt nothing but coldness. I watched her in the candlelight and wondered how she could stand there, celebrating my birthday, while simultaneously planning her wedding to another man. She pushed the cake a little closer to me, her face full of hopeful expectation. "Come on, make a wish." When I didn't move, she prompted me again. "Hurry, sit down and blow out the candles." Finally, under her expectant gaze, I blew out the candles. When the lights came on, she pushed a small gift box across the table. Inside, nestled in blue velvet, were 2 matching rings. The rings I had bought for us so long ago. I had left them behind in the condo when I left. Now, seeing them shimmering under the lights, the whole situation felt like a cruel joke. "Do you want to try it on?" Rose asked tentatively. I looked her straight in the eye. "Would you marry me?" I asked slowly. She said nothing. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled it away. Her hand hung awkwardly in the air. Even without her answer, I already knew the truth. She would never give up the alliance with the Sterling family, and she would certainly never marry me. I had known that for years. All she wanted was for me to go back to being her obedient kept man. I looked up at her. "I have a gift for you, too," I said. She seemed to sense what was coming and tried to stop me. "Can we just put on the rings first?" I ignored her and walked into the other room. From the back of a closet, I pulled out a box. Inside were all the things I had bought for our unborn child, back when I was filled with so much hope. Tiny clothes and toys, still in their original packaging. The moment she saw the box, the color drained from her face. She looked away, asking a question she already knew the answer to. "Why are you showing me this?" I pointed to the little outfits inside. "Look," I said, my voice cracking. "He would have looked so cute in these, wouldn't he? He would have called me Dad, and you Mom." But he was never coming back. Rose picked up the knife and began to cut the cake, but her hand was shaking so badly that she completely destroyed the word happiness written in frosting. "You see, We could never be happy. Meg, stop it, she pleaded. Let's just eat the cake. It's your birthday. Our child is gone, I said, my voice flat. You knew, from the moment you decided to get rid of him without telling me. You knew we could never go back. Her hand finally stilled. She covered her face and started to sob, unable to form a complete sentence. Seeing her so broken, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. I stared at her, enunciating every word. Or maybe, you knew from the very beginning that you were never going to let her child be born. But she never said a word to me. She let me go on planning and dreaming like a fool. That day, 2 years ago, Rose told me she was going on an overseas business trip. The moment she left, her mother showed up with her men. For the next month, it was as if Rose had vanished from the face of the earth. My calls went unanswered, my texts were never returned. And then, the moment I agreed to take her mother's money, she suddenly reappeared. She had rushed back so fast that she'd even missed her company's most important annual meeting. But none of that could make me forgive her for what she did to our child. She looked at me, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Her voice was choked with sobs. She was trying to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. This powerful, decisive woman who ran a corporate empire couldn't even form a coherent sentence. I looked at her, tears of bitter laughter streaming down my face. Rose, I said, you don't deserve to be forgiven. Not ever. I left the condo and walked aimlessly for hours. It wasn't until the sky began to lighten that I realized where I was. I had walked all the way to the beach where Rose and I first met. My grandmother had just passed away, and following her wishes, I had scattered her ashes in the ocean there. I used to come to that spot and sit for hours whenever I missed her. That day, I saw a little kid fall into the water. Without a second thought, I ran in and pulled the child out. But a large wave knocked me off my feet and dragged me under. As my lungs filled with salt water, I remembered a crucial fact. I didn't know how to swim. Just as I thought I was about to die, Rose appeared. That was the first time we met. She took me to the hospital, and when she realized I wasn't trying to kill myself, she saw how shaken I was and stayed with me the entire night, just so I wouldn't be alone. I had no idea who she was back then. All I knew was that she was kind and caring. She reminded me of my grandmother, who used to sit by my bedside all night whenever I was sick. A short while later, after I graduated from college, I went for a job interview. I never expected it to be her company. She offered me a different kind of position. She offered to make me her lover. And just like that, I was. For the first year, she doted on me. But then I heard about Ethan, the man who looked so much like me. That's when I found out that she had been engaged for a long time. But I crossed the line. I started to want more than just her money. I want a life with her, a normal family, maybe a kid or two. But none of that was ever possible. Her family would never allow her to choose her own husband. Chloe found me sitting on that same beach, staring blankly at the waves. By the time our project wrapped up, the new hotel Rose and Ethan had built for their wedding was complete. Chloe and I returned to Miami. A while later, news broke online that Rose and Ethan had called off their engagement. Not long after that, Rose's mother found me. She accused me of ruining the alliance between the Miller and Sterling families. I looked at her furious face and said calmly, I only told him the truth. Before I left that coffee shop, I had told Ethan one last thing. Rose only loves herself. 2 years later, my company opened a new branch back in my home city. Thanks to my performance and my background, I was naturally chosen to head the new office. When I first got back, I was completely swamped. It took about 2 months for things to finally settle down. Then one day, I was reviewing a project proposal, and I saw a familiar name, Rose Miller. I sat there in my office chair, staring into space for so long that my assistant had to call my name twice to get my attention. She informed me that the client had scheduled a dinner meeting for 8 o'clock that evening to discuss the project. That evening, I took my team to the restaurant and saw her again for the first time in years. Well, not exactly. I saw her face all the time on financial websites and business news channels. There had been a lot of press about her over the past 2 years. A brilliant, single female CEO was always a hot topic. When she saw me, she extended her hand, her smile confident and bright. Long time no see, she said. I took her hand briefly, the touch of her skin sending a jolt through me, and then quickly let go. I gave her a small nod. It has been a while. That night, we were the perfect professionals. Neither of us brought up the past. After we concluded our business, I finally had to ask the question that had been nagging at me. Why did you choose our company for this partnership? She let out a small laugh. I've worked with your parent company before and had a good experience. Besides, I think this new project has a lot of potential. I was silent for a long moment, until she broke the silence. You didn't think it was because of you, did you? For a second, I was speechless, and then I silently cursed myself. After all these years, it seemed I was the only one still stuck in the past. The project took about a month to complete. Afterwards, someone on my team suggested we should celebrate, since it was our new branch's first major success. Not wanting to crush their morale, I agreed. The party was held on the beach. There were flowers, music, and fireworks. It was all very romantic. I was in a good mood, so I had a few more drinks than usual. Through a hazy fog, I thought I heard someone call out, "Ms. Miller." When I woke up, I was in a hotel room. Lying next to me, completely naked, was Rose. For a moment, I was disoriented. It felt like all those years ago, when she used to wake up in my arms every morning. I thought maybe last night was just a dream. But no, it was real. Rose and I were together again. "Morning," she said, her voice hoarse as she opened her eyes and saw me. I kept my lips pressed together, saying nothing. I had no idea how to process what had just happened between us. Were we a couple again, or was this just a one-time mistake? Seeing my silence, Rose spoke first. "Last night was a mistake," she said coolly. "Don't worry. We're both adults. I don't expect you to take responsibility." I opened my mouth to say something, choking on my anger. But before I could speak, she was already dressed and out the door, without a single backward glance. Just like that, our relationship was back on ice. After that night, we both made a conscious effort to avoid each other. 2 months later, I got a call from Chloe. She told me she was at the hospital and had just seen Rose at the OB/GYN clinic. Chloe had come back home before me to take care of her mom. After she returned, she met a new guy through some friends. She had recently gotten pregnant and was at the hospital for a routine checkup when she saw Rose. Rose hadn't seen her, but Chloe was worried and felt she had to tell me. My mind immediately flashed back to what had happened all those years ago. I didn't say a word. I hung up with Chloe and immediately dialed Rose's number. It rang and rang with no answer. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hospital Chloe had mentioned. After running 3 red lights, I finally found her. She was holding a paper from her appointment. I could see the words clearly on the page, "Pregnant for weeks." My vision went red. I grabbed her arm. "Were you planning on getting rid of this one behind my back too? Are you with the patient?" The doctor sitting nearby interjected. "The fetus is developing perfectly. She's just here for a checkup. You're going to frighten her." The doctor's words snapped me back to reality. I looked at Rose, stunned. "You're just here for a checkup?" With tears in her eyes, she looked at me and nodded. "This time," she whispered, "I'm going to have our baby." My hand, still holding hers, was trembling. She squeezed it tightly, and in that moment I knew this was a new beginning for us.